Coming up in today's newscast, a Knesset member resigns from the government to protest the new Jewish nation-state law. Violent clashes break out at the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, and we've got the scoop on how Israelis celebrated Hebrew Valentine's Day. A member of the Knesset has just taken a surprising stand against the government's recent passage of the Jewish nation-state law. MK Zwaher Balul, an Arab-Israeli member of the Labor Party, has officially resigned from his position, accusing the government of becoming the, quote, private estate of Netanyahu and his cohorts. This resignation comes on the heels of a new wave of outrage over the controversial text of the new law.
מה המשמעות של זכויות לאום? הן מגדירות את הדגל, את ההמנון, את השפה, וכמובן את העובדה שאחד מיעדיה היסודיים של המדינה הוא קיבוץ גלויות עמנו וקליטתם פה בארץ ישראל. זוהי מהות החזון הציוני.
Now, proponents say that the legislation merely enshrines the country's Jewish identity into its de facto constitutional basic laws. But critics point out that for nearly 2 million non-Jews living in the country, the nation-state law is tantamount to a legalization of apartheid for greenlighting possible discrimination based on nationality and religion alone. The Druze minority, for example, serves in the IDF and performs national service for the State of Israel despite not being Jewish. Netanyahu convened a special meeting with the Druze leaders after the community voiced their extreme objection over the law. Despite a promise to make future legislation to appease the community, Israel's Druze community remains insulted by the law. This includes dozens of Druze parents whose children were killed in the line of duty while serving in the IDF. A panel of 180 Israeli writers and poets have just written a letter to Netanyahu urging him to reverse the nation-state law on the grounds that it, quote, explicitly allows racial and religious discrimination, rescinds the status of Arabic as an official language, and does not mention democracy as the basis of the regime. This statement was signed by writers including David Grossman, who mere months ago received the government's Israel Prize for Literature, as well as the Man Booker Prize, in addition to beloved Israeli novelists Amos Oz and Etgar Keret. Lawmakers on the right, however, seem unlikely to reverse their stance on the law. After learning of his fellow Knesset member's resignation, Education Minister Naphtali Bensimon was quoted as saying, "The Israeli Knesset won't cry over it, so he'll resign." Well, here now to discuss the controversy surrounding Israel's nation-state law in depth is Naphtali Bensimon, a journalist and member of the Likud party, and Dr. Amir Peretz from the Israel Democracy Institute. Thank you both so much for coming. Now, Netanyahu has made it pretty clear in recent statements that he sees this as an attack from the left, the criticism of the bill. Is that how you guys both feel?
It's very clear to me that it becomes a political issue and not the substance of the law, because we already 4 years it was debate on the Israeli parliament, fine-tuning here, fine-tuning there, debates, political crisis, everything, discussions, and now when it comes to the end, to the vote of the parliament, the majority of the people of Israel that vote for them, now it becomes a huge scandal. And it's also give me another example of the way that it's not enough to bring a good product to the table. You need how to deliver it. And unfortunately, and I'm saying that because this is my party, we didn't focus on the delivery, and we just focus on the product. And the left took it to a political crisis, political issue, racism, whatsoever, but nothing to do with the substance of the law.
So you don't feel that the law itself is inherently racist or has things in it that could allow racism by practice of Israeli law?
Not at all, because I think, in my opinion, and I talked to many representatives from the Likud party and from others, we just wanted for once for all that this law will come from the Knesset and not from the Supreme Court that will give every year another interpretation to the law. What is the state of Israel? This is a Jewish state, equality of everything, but in the sense of our existence here, this is a Jewish state, and it was very important for the Prime Minister Netanyahu to bring it to the Knesset and not to leave it to the Supreme Court to decide what is a Jewish state. he can give many interpretation, and we didn't like it. And I'm glad that it was in the Knesset and not in the Supreme Court.
Amir, how do you feel?
Yeah, okay. I totally disagree that the problem is on the delivery. The problem is with the product. And I have to say that I'm coming totally from a Zionist point of view. I agree that Israel is the nation state of the Jewish people. It should be like that. And most of the paragraph itself in the law, most of them, I have no problem with them. The real problem is what is lacking in the nation state bill.
What's not
the
written.
law.
Right.
Yeah. Because this is not just another basic law, like some proponents are trying to say. This is a law that defines Israel. It very much resembles, when you look abroad, to preamble to constitutions.
Right. It feels like the rewriting of the Constitution.
One example of a problematic issue that you don't find in the law.
I will. Whenever you see a constitution, there is always a statement, and especially in nation state, where you say the nation is the nation of the X people. Then you say, and it's also the nation of all its minorities. And we will provide perfect equal rights to everyone, like it was written in the Declaration of Independence. And when you write a nation state bill like that, and you omit this, and it purposefully, and I agree with you, it was not done in hush. I know this, and I deal with this bill since 2011. So there is no rush here. It was done purposefully that the equality is not written there, and it is not written in any other basic law. We have basic law of human dignity, which equality is not written there, although the Supreme Court did interpret human dignity as including equality, but it's not the same when it's not written firmly. And also, you have to remember that the basic law, specifically basic law about human dignity, is even not entrenched with a special majority. So you cannot say that now we're on equal terms. And you talked about the majority in the Knesset. I think that the fact that the basic law that defines Israel as a Jewish state, which I totally support, passed only with a 62 majority is so... What message are we saying to our enemies and to people who hate us and to people who say that this shouldn't be a Jewish state? So, well, there's a big controversy in Israel. There's only 62 majority. Let me finish. Yeah. If the law included, like Benny Begin's proposal, a definition of Israel as a basic law, as a nation state of the Jewish people, and also equality, and also the fact that we're Jewish and democratic, and we respect all our minorities, not only Jews, which are, of course, it's very important, but all other minorities, then the law could pass with 90 people who vote for it. This is why I think it's very, it's a mistake, and I really hope that it will be amended soon.
I think it's naive to think that we couldn't reach such a majority in the parliament, 90 votes, including the Arabs' votes.
90 is not including the Arab votes.
No, or someone else. This is the coalition party, the political issue that you have coalition and opposition, and 62 votes, it's also a majority. And also the vast majority of the other parties, the Zionist party, agree with the law, but didn't agree, but disagree with some small issues. But now what we see is like huge crisis about how to define Israel. Is a racist state or what we are. And I think we are playing a very dangerous game, a political game, with something that used to be very obvious, that this is a Jewish state. And if we start to argue about if this is yes or not, and to define it by international law of a racism, not racist, or something like that, we are playing a very dangerous game. So we cannot change the law. This is the law, but we have to listen. We have to be an open mind and to listen to the other minorities in Israel.
Well, I want to ask you then, because now we have heard from a lot of minorities, almost 2 million non-Jewish people who feel hurt, outraged, insulted by the law. So what can be done for those people who do feel alienated from the government and the country they live in now?
Open and honest discussion with the with the parliament and with the religious people, with spiritual people, with politicians, with the prime minister, with the president. I will expect from the prime minister and the president to do something to unite this country for behind this law, because this law is nothing to do with harming minorities in Israel. It must be very clear. It's just the interpretation of the law. So I call to the president of the Israel and the prime minister of Israel to do something to reduce the tension, because the daily life is much more important than the declaration and the political slogan that we hear, because it's not a political game, it's our life here. And this is something that I'm very worried about it, and I hope that we will reduce the tension and open an honest discussion.
Dr. Fuchs, real quickly, what do you think minority groups should or even can do at this point now that the law is passed to fix the
situation? They can show what they feel, and I think this is what they do now. And I think we are the majority. I mean, you know, the Jewish majority. We should be generous to them. They don't have the political power to pass. They won't have 62 vote in the future. We could and we should try to phrase a basic nation-state law or a constitution, if we're already in it, that respects all minorities like any other. We're not the only nation-state. We're not the only nation-state, and it's totally legitimate that we have the law of return, which deals with immigration. And it's totally, and like Netanyahu said, he is always, when someone is trying to defend the law, is talking about the obvious things that we already have them in regular laws, like the anthem and the flag, and all these, which are totally legitimate, and there is no problem.
But
there were a few problems.
Do you know something, Amir?
Yeah. I'm sorry,
sometimes we have to emphasize the obvious. This is very important.
I agree, but in a constitution, you also emphasize this obvious, but you also have to balance with the clear state that we're a democracy and we give full equality to all our
we could talk about this
minorities.
forever, and I have a feeling we will. So thank you both so much for coming in. We'll see you soon.
No problem.
Well, shortly before the weekend, an Israeli man was stabbed to death in the West Bank by a 17-year-old Palestinian attacker in the settlement of Adam. The victim, Yotam Ovadia, was a father of two. The suspect breached the security barrier of the Adam settlement in the West Bank and penetrated deep into the community before encountering Ovadia in the street sometime before 9 p.m. on Thursday night, which is when he pulled out a knife and stabbed the victim to death. A second resident of the Adam settlement may have heard the commotion and approached the scene. He was stabbed as well, though is currently in stable condition in the hospital. A third resident was also lightly injured, but managed to shoot his attacker dead with a handgun, killing him on the spot. The Army has responded to this incident by raiding the suspect's home, interrogating his family, and preparing to demolish their house. IDF forces maintain that this is an effective means of deterring terror attacks like these. Others, however, condemn the practice as a form of collective punishment that only incubates hatred and compels this dance of violence to spiral into chaos. This is the first such stabbing incident in the West Bank in several months now. Needless to say, many are worried that the relative calm in the region is now coming to an end. Speaking of a relative calm, things along the Gaza border have been anything but that. 2 Palestinians were killed over the weekend, including a 12-year-old boy, in clashes with Israeli troops. Now, this brings the overall Palestinian death toll to nearly 160 since those weekly clashes first started earlier this year. ILTV's Aaron Porras is here with more on this.
Thank you, Brett. And yeah, the 2 victims of this weekend's riots were killed when the IDF responded again to literally thousands of Palestinians rioting along the border, as you said. They were throwing rocks, burning tires, and attempting to infiltrate or otherwise damage the fence. This, of course, is after recent sniper fire over the border, as well as incendiary attacks that have essentially never ended since they began.
Right, for months.
Exactly. Now, obviously, every loss of life is tragic, but Israeli security heads have been quite adamant that there will be zero tolerance for violence and other attempts to infringe on Israeli sovereignty. The international community continues to denounce Israel's response, but largely refuses to denounce Hamas's instigations. For example, the UN's Middle East envoy Nikolai Mladenov took to social media again to criticize the deaths of these 2 Palestinians, but he made very little mention of any Israeli victims.
Well, look, on one hand, I think that most nations do agree that any country has the right to defend its own borders. On the other hand, a lot of the criticism here and with these clashes seems to be stemming from the fact that the IDF regularly authorizes lethal force as opposed to rubber bullets, let's say, or other methods of crowd control. That's the debate, anyway, and the subject of an incoming international probe into potential war crimes committed by Israel in these clashes. But there were 2 more casualties in Gaza this weekend, I believe, correct?
Yeah, the 2 Palestinians from the PFLP terror army actually were reported killed near the Jabalia refugee camp overnight. Initially, it was blamed also on Israeli drone strikes, but the Gaza Health Ministry later corrected the reports, saying it was an IDF attack.
It was not an IDF attack.
I'm sorry, yes, I misspoke, saying it was not an IDF attack, and rather that the 2 were killed by accident while actually preparing to launch a rocket into Israel. So the rocket exploded on the launch pad
as an
and killed
accident,
them.
right? Meanwhile, as all this was happening on the Gaza front, we also saw our first clashes in quite some time on the Temple Mount, correct, between Israeli troops and rioters. What's the story there?
Honestly, this is a pretty classic repeat of issues, of clashes at the Temple Mount, or the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound, as it's called in Arabic. And Palestinians were firing fireworks and throwing rocks at police and security officers. It's unclear whether the clashes or attempted arrests came first, what came first out of the 2, but nearly 20 arrests were made in the end, and the Temple Mount was closed for about 24 hours.
Well, as we know, the Al-Aqsa Mosque is one of the most sacred sites in the Muslim faith, making that spot quite delicate politically. I mean, for years, members of the Israeli government have held a self-imposed ban on even visiting the site for fear of creating a conflict. That ban was actually lifted earlier this month by Netanyahu. I don't know if those are related, but it's interesting. In any case, thank you for your report, Aaron.
Thank you.
Well, a few weeks ago, we got a sneak peek at the future of education in real-life 3D. Well, we're turning to the studio now with an even crazier hands-on look at augmented reality is real-life 3D CEO Zvika Moshkovich. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much.
So, before we do what we're about to do here, tell us what we're about to do.
Okay, so last time we've been here, you asked us to see a demonstration of how Arthur will teach us.
Right, in the goggles.
In the goggles, yeah, exactly. So we have one demonstration of that you want me?
Tell me, who are we going to see?
Okay, so we are going to see Elvis Presley.
Awesome.
We are going to bring him back to life, and you will be able to ask Arthur whatever you want about Elvis, and he will answer you, and he will show you very beautiful things.
All right, lay it on me. Let's do this. How do we do this? So I'm putting the goggles on.
Yeah.
Oh boy. All right. Wouldn't my mother be proud of me now? All right. Okay. The goggles are on.
Excellent. Okay, so.
Okay, I'm looking around. Oh, here we go. Okay.
Let's press start.
So now I do.
Look at the words.
Hello.
Whoa.
Nice to meet you.
Oh my goodness.
My name is Arthur. I am the ultimate teacher. Ask me anything.
So now I'm just going to ask Arthur. Arthur, I would like to learn about Elvis Presley.
Elvis Aaron Presley was born in Mississippi, USA.
Oh.
On January 8, 1935.
My goodness.
He was an only child.
Now,
At a young age,
I know what you guys are
people
seeing, but
noticed that
what it
Elvis
feels
had an
like
excellent
to
singing
experience
voice.
this is pretty
At the
crazy
age of
because I
10,
hear
he gave
the
his
sound
first public
and
singing
I can
performance.
see
Elvis had
my
a unique
hands, but I
style
see
of music
Arthur,
and performance all his own.
and I'm
Now,
calling him
it is a
Arthur and
great
he's not
pleasure to
real,
meet and
which is
present
its own
Elvis
thing.
Presley.
And here he comes. Oh, here he comes. Here he comes. There he is. There he is. I see him dancing in the ILTV studio. Let's just check the hips. That's Elvis. That's Elvis, all right. Wow. Zvika, this is amazing. This is really amazing. Elvis, thank you. Thank you, Elvis. I don't know if any other interviewer ever got to do that in their time in journalism, but Zvika, that is okay. How did you do that? How did you do that?
Okay, so basically what we are trying to do is to make learning much more fun and much more efficient.
Sure.
So
it is that. It's a lot more fun.
Yeah, so we took Elvis 3D model and on all the information and interviews that he used to make while he was still alive. And we built a scene for us to enjoy, to learn from.
Yeah. But do you map every 3D environment with the glasses as soon as you enter a place, or how does the 3D mapping work?
Okay, so this technology calls mixed reality. That means that it has a concept of looking on the room you're in and map it, see the walls, see the people, see the person, and you can choose where you want to locate the subject that you want to talk with and to learn from.
Amazing. I gotta say, just having those glasses on, and I'm skeptical about things like that, but as soon as I put them on, I was just blown away by the feeling of something virtual melding with my real environments, and it feels like the future is happening right now in front of me. So Vika, good luck with this. I have a feeling you'll have a lot of success.
Thank you very
for coming
much.
back.
Thank you.
Of course. Well, over the weekend, you might have seen Israelis making last-minute purchases for flowers and chocolates and the like. That's because Thursday night was the holiday of Tu B'Av, which you can think of as the Israeli Valentines Day. Here now with the lowdown on the festivities is ILTV's Emmanuel Kadosh. What's up?
Thanks, Brett. Okay, so this is pretty interesting. Tu B'Av originally served as a matchmaking day, you could say, for all those unmarried women out there.
Like a singles holiday.
Exactly. It was originally a day where women dressed in all white and went dancing in the vineyards, and that tradition has been kept up till this very day, you know, with a bit of a modern twist to it, you could say.
Okay, so just want to ask, if Israelis celebrate Tu B'Av as kind of like a local Valentine's Day, what about February 14th? Like, does American Valentine's Day, does that happen?
All right, that's
in
a
Israel?
great question. It really depends. I mean, you could definitely see and notice, you know, American Valentine's Day here in Tel Aviv. You see the red and white balloons on the streets, on the restaurants, and flowers being sold to everybody who is willing to pay for the flowers. And it's not celebrated as an actual holiday, of course. There's just so many internationals here, especially in Tel Aviv. You know, a lot of Americans, I think it just became more of a tradition to celebrate Valentine's Day than anything else, really.
Okay, so maybe you get two if you want. Okay.
Exactly.
So other than dancing, are there any traditions in Tu B'Av that we should be aware of, like for next year if we need to
Right.
do
Well, actually, I read that Tu B'Av has no formal legal status as a holiday.
Okay.
It's a regular working day like any other day, so it really just meant to be a day where love is shared and recognized. Other than that, there are no real traditions that go along with the holiday, but you see a lot of weddings happening on that date, and of course the city becomes all romantic with people singing, dancing, giving flowers, easily comparable to Valentine's Day.
Okay, yeah, I think I noticed like this not very subtle kissing booth
Right.
on the beach of Tel Aviv.
Right.
There's pictures of that.
I'm almost positive this is the first year that they're doing it. The kissing spot, so it's called, was set up as a hot pink life-size picture frame where couples can come and take pictures kissing and capture their love on camera with the absolute most gorgeous backdrop of the sea at the Tel Aviv beach, kind of like, you know, the mistletoe at Christmas you could compare it to.
Okay. Here's maybe the most important question I'm ever going to ask you. How did you celebrate Tu B'Av, Emmanuel?
Okay, well, I wish I had a more exciting story than this. I actually spent my Tu B'Av surrounded by tons of my friends, good food, wine, and, you know, tons of chocolate. What about you?
It may sound corny,
Probably
but
will.
since you're asking, this actually happened to be my 3rd anniversary.
Oh, congratulations.
So we laid low. We had a little picnic with our new dog.
Yes.
His name is Coochie. Now, that's the name that he came with when we adopted him.
And you weren't changing that.
So we're sticking with it because he answers to Coochie. And he's a pug. He's 5 years old, so if you're lucky, maybe someday you'll meet.
Oh, well, first of all, Mazal Tov, and thank you.
Of course. Thanks, Emmanuel. Well, if you're living in the Golan Heights, you may have just felt the earth tremble a bit. No, it was not an earthquake, though there have been plenty of those lately. In this case, it was probably the detonation of 350 active landmines in the Golan Heights. Don't worry, though, it was not an accident, just a controlled explosion conducted by the Israeli army to help clean up land in the north. This was one heck of a boom. The controlled explosion was overseen by Israel's Ministry of Defense and lasted something like 15 seconds. The National Mine Action Authority has been clearing landmines from Israeli land for the last 7 years or so, and by now, close to 1,000 in total have been cleared. Today's explosion clears new land in areas around the Daughters of Jacob Bridge located in the southern Golan. The area was booby-trapped by either Israeli or Syrian armies, or perhaps both, over the course of past wars. There are many active landmine fields scattered throughout the country. Unfortunately, these hazard zones have often claimed some devastating accidental victims, including Israeli children, who wandered into danger without knowing it. That's why the government passed legislation back in 2011 demanding that all active landmine fields be cleared, an effort that is time-consuming and sometimes dangerous, but necessary nevertheless. Today, specialists estimate that roughly 9,000 hectares of Israeli territory may still house lethal landmines, which means that the Defense Ministry certainly has its work cut out for them.
The Hebrew word of the day is brought to you by IDC Summer Ulpan, open to everyone.
Now here comes our Hebrew word of the day. Well, sometimes on a hot summer's day, like today for example, a dip in the ocean or a glass of lemonade is exactly what you need to cool down, and that's why today's word is bur, which is how you say exactly in Hebrew. You hit the nail right in the head. Okay, so bul is more of like an idiom than an actual word, but literally bul means stamp, unrelated, like the kind you put on an envelope to send someone to your grandma. But on the streets, When you talk to someone, when someone gives you exactly what you were craving, you say, that's bur, my man. Or when a recipe calls for exactly 300 grams of sugar, you say it needs 300 grams bur. But when I'm making brownies, that goes double in my kitchen. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight should be clear and warm with a low of 76 or 24 degrees Celsius. Then tomorrow you can expect partly cloudy skies, but no change in temperatures with a high of around 87 or 31 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.65 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at ILTV.tv, and don't forget to follow us on Facebook at Israel English News and on Twitter at ILTV News. I'm Brett Allen Smith, and thanks for watching.